Thanks for the quick adaptation as we get the school year kicked off. I'm Michael Goldberg. I'm our executive director for the Veal Institute for Entrepreneurship. Also, I'm a professor at Weatherhead. Really thrilled to be back for the start of campus. Awesome that we have so many students here from across our campus representing engineering, law, arts and sciences, and business. Also, thrilled that we have a few friends from our partners at Jumpstart here. Jumpstart actually had its origin on campus at Weatherhead, and we're thrilled actually to be hosting a group from Jumpstart here today. So welcome to our speaker series. This is part of an AI series. Mike Fisher, who's here today, who's a double alum and the former CTO of Etsy, sort of helped curate this series. In the spring, we had a number of colleagues from across campus that are involved in AI, and we're thrilled to welcome our colleagues from the School of Law today. All of our sessions are student moderated, and Maggie O'Connor, who's a 3L, is going to moderate today and introduce the speakers. So Maggie, let me turn it over to you. These sessions are very interactive. So whether you're with us at ThinkBox today, joining us on Zoom, or watching on LinkedIn Live, let us know questions. We'll let Maggie sort of drive the initial part of the questions, and then we will open it up to you all. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maggie.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the but my name is Maggie. Thanks for joining today. I'm a third-year law student, and I'm also getting my master's degree in bioethics and medical humanities. So this area is really interesting to me. Our two great panelists today are Matthew Salerno, who is an assistant professor of law at our law school, and Layla Maurer, who is legal counsel for digital gaming teams at Wizards of the Coast. So I've got some questions for you guys, but would you like to introduce yourselves first?
Sure. Well, as Maggie mentioned, my name is Layla. I work as in-house counsel for digital games and data privacy at Wizards of the Coast. If you're not familiar with Wizards, they're the company that's responsible for Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering. So my role is primarily to do with digital implementations of both of those, but also a lot to do with how data privacy and AI affect our use of technology in those games and those realms specifically. So this is why I was introduced here today, or brought here today, by Matt Salerno. He's my former professor, and happy to be here.
And I'm Matt Salerno. First, a little housekeeping. Thanks to the Veal Institute for having us. Thanks to Mike. Thanks to Maggie for sort of agreeing to moderate. I appreciate that. And thanks to Layla for joining me all the way from New York to be here today. I think they both mentioned they're former students of mine, so happy to be able to spend some time with them outside of the classroom setting, talking about something I hope to be interesting. I'm an assistant professor at the law school. I teach legal writing, specifically in the world of transactional documents. I also teach some bankruptcy. And I'm thrilled to be here. I hope it will be an interesting topic. Prior to coming to the teaching profession full-time, I practiced for about 20 years here in town at a couple of firms locally. It's been really interesting to see what's happening in AI and tech. It's not as though it's a new topic, but it has certainly gotten a meteoric amount of publicity and news of late, and we're all in the area of law trying to figure out what we're going to do about that. So hopefully today we'll at least share some interesting information. And again, thanks for having us.
Great, thank you both so much. So to start off, I guess, what kind of benefits and opportunities do you see surrounding the use of AI in the legal field specifically?
So I'll start just sort of on a high level. I think to frame the conversation up a little bit, AI in legal is a mix of super enthusiasm and excitement, and we're running down the road at full speed and can't wait to use it with no limitations, countered with we're generally risk-averse types of people, and we're worried that it's going too fast and too out of control with no limitations. And where it ends up, I'm sure, will be somewhere in the middle. But for me personally, I'm optimistic about the technology and what it can do in the practice of law, and I'll answer your question directly here in a second. But I think I'll say it now because I'll forget to say it with every single question that you ask. Cautiously optimistic is the way it generally we feel in the area of law, and I think that's appropriate. Some direct benefits that I can see on the horizon, or I hope we'll get to on the horizon. Everybody that deals in AI will tell you things like, well, certainly it's going to increase efficiency when you talk about the practice of law. And increased efficiency in theory produces cost saving. Cost savings, we think, provides more opportunity for more people to have access to lawyering and good lawyers. I think that's great if that's in fact what happens. Access and more access to lawyering, quote unquote, good lawyering or good lawyer documentation should be a good thing for everyone. We want our laws to be as fairly applied as they can be. So I think that can open up some doors there that maybe we haven't seen in the past. Other benefits of it, there are some tasks that lawyers do, and I'll be careful not to besmirch my own practice here. Sometimes we do some mundane things. We review documents, lots of them, lots and lots and lots of them. And this type of technology, if we're talking about generative AI, or I should say that too, that's really what I'm talking about. We can use technology to help us with those tasks. It's not unfair to say that humans get tired. Humans have lapses in concentration. And in theory, technology shouldn't. So we can find ways, I think, to use this to the benefit of those who practice in law. And I think we can use it to the benefit of those receiving advice from lawyers and things like that. But I think we need to be careful. And I think we should not rush to assume that AI is, in fact, a lawyer. It's not. And maybe we'll talk more about that as this develops and later on, but that's a caution that I think we need to get out there right away.
Yeah, I'll add on to that as well. From working in an in-house perspective, you're dealing with business teams all day long who are making lots of decisions at light speed. So our job tends to be advising on those opinions and decisions, telling them where there's risk, telling them where they can and can't do things. But with the addition of tools to help evaluate that risk, it's saving us a lot of time. I will not say that we're allowing AI to make those decisions for us. We never would, but the decisions are happening faster as a result of that initial assessment, which we then review. So that's one major benefit of having AI do some of this work. Another major benefit that we're seeing is helping to direct the creative teams. And I say that cautiously because we're not allowing, and nobody should or would ever allow, for their creative teams to be run by AI. Never, not anything. But we do allow for use for evaluative purposes, for things like bringing in new art pieces that somebody has created and seeing, first of all, whether it's independently created, whether it's unique art, whether it's something that somebody has designed by themselves or if they've had use of AI in the process. And those sorts of things help us to drive our creative decisions. So lots and lots of things happening.
And so one thing for the audience, and by the way, thank you all for coming to our live and our virtual audience. We can't ignore the fact that AI is being used out there in the real world, nor should we, right? Let's just embrace it and move on. And I think we all have to figure out what to do about that. In the area of law, it's interesting. We don't really get to test our advice. We have to give it. And then there are ramifications, either good or bad, based on it. So integrating AI into the things that lawyers do is moving quickly. Maybe sometimes we want it to move more slowly. Maybe sometimes we wish it would adapt faster. But lawyers themselves have to deal also with the companies that are already making use of AI in specific ways. And so lawyers generally owe a duty to their clients to be aware of what's going on with technology and law and life and everything else, right? As it should be. So there's no putting your head in the sand when it comes to AI or generative AI or any of the forms of it as far as the law goes. It's there. What we'll do with it remains to be seen. It's literally evolving day by day.
Yeah.
When we talked about what we could talk about, we wondered how things would change before we got here. And that's just true. It's moving, it's here, and we have to deal with it. And even in my classes in the law school, we accept that and on we go.
Yeah. Another thing I'll add on, and I know we're like one
Yeah,
question
sorry.
in,
Oh,
we've got
no,
25 to
go.
go. Just in what the tools are being used for in the legal field generally. Now we're seeing some really fabulous implementations of generative AI in legal technology. So this is not saying using ChatGPT for your contract writing. It's nothing of the sort, but it is these individual companies that are integrating AI tools that are based on Gen AI and that are doing some of the initial researching, pulling together data sets of existing legal templates, contracts, documentation, and helping you to create new templates based off of that research. So that's awesome. We love seeing that. But again, we want to have our own eyes on it after it comes out. So it's always just a first step, never a final step.
Right. And, you know, kind of in that same vein, and you talking about art and finding these new artists, there's been a lot of pieces in the news concerning lawsuits against AI and all these questions of ownership, and copyright infringement that haven't really been answered clearly. So can you shed any light on these issues, specifically in terms of infringement and ownership?
Do you want to?
You go first this time.
Yes, limitedly, I think. So copyright itself is a really interesting question and domain, because in order to be able to qualify for copyright, you have to be able to show ownership that you have created this thing. The Copyright Office actually had released an opinion recently stating that anything that was created by generative AI is not copyrighted. You cannot submit it for copyright in the Copyright Office. And I think that's the right direction to go. Now, that's not saying you can't use it for refining or just, you know, changing the color, whatever it is you want to do. I'm not an art major, unfortunately, but if you are using it after you have initially created the thing, that's a different story. There's also a lot of questions, especially in my company and like area of gaming, about authorship, not just ownership. So authorship comes in a couple of different ways. It can come into the narrative design that we're doing. It can come into author that we're using for our games, and all of that again has to be something that is human centered.
And I'll add to it. The life of a lawyer is often riddled with questions sort of like the one you posed. I created this, what can I do with it? Or how can you protect it? And that's all the information you get as a lawyer, and then you have to figure out an answer to that question and give some good advice the client can rely on, hopefully to be protected by. And in this area, it's not clear. It isn't. It's developing as we go. So it can be difficult for a lawyer in those situations to give a clear answer that makes sense. It's developing as we go. Lawyers, as you two know, and maybe others, we tend to be creatures of precedent. We go by what's already out there. What can we rely on? This is an area that's developing, and some of it isn't out there yet. It's going to develop as lawsuits are filed, as things are challenged. We'll get some guidance and we'll get some rulings, and we'll try to act on those. But it's a bit of an uncomfortable spot sometimes for the lawyer to have to work in an area where it's not totally clear what means what at this point. So again, use the word you'll probably hear 1,000 times in the presentation: caution, cautious, and conservative of that. We have to be careful that we are actually helping clients do what they're trying to do in a way that can provide real value-added advice to them. And it is not always easy in this area.
Speaking of infringement, you asked as well, there have been already several lawsuits filed concerning OpenAI specifically, one of which involves Sarah Silverman and several other authors as a class action. They were inferring that ChatGPT unlawfully read through all of their material and then summarized and spit it out without actually having access to the material lawfully. So that's an interesting question. It's a matter of, what did ChatGPT have access to? How did it have access to it? Should it have had access to it? Because infringement, to show infringement, you have to have shown access, and then you have to have shown that there was a copy made that was substantially similar. So what is substantially similar? If you're spitting something out that looks a little bit like something somebody wrote, that's probably not substantial similarity. But if you're spitting something out that identical to the paragraph somebody wrote, that's different. So it's, again, this open question. Nobody's sure how to answer it at this point. If anybody's a super nerd who wants to look into this, there is a motion to dismiss from OpenAI that you should read. It is fascinating and it's just mind-boggling.
I know we touched a little bit on it, but I just want to see if there's any other general concerns that you have for the legal field or implications that this could have.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I was gonna just piggyback there, but I was hoping we'd get to it. So thanks for asking it. Yes, there are concerns, and that's my answer. But I'll be more specific. Of course, there are concerns. One was just illustrated, as lawyers, I think some of you may know, we have duties to protect our clients' confidential information. It's a privilege that's given between the attorney and the client. And when you are talking about an entity making use of a product that gathers information from anywhere that it can find it, particularly if you're the person inputting information for it to learn from, we don't yet know the ramifications and the parameters of how that's out there for the rest of the world, how that's out to be drawn upon later. Are there going to be problems that lawyers themselves will face if they input things that end up turning out to be inappropriate or unauthorized release of confidential information? It is a serious risk that's out there, and I'm pretty sure that even in some of these models, they'll give you a warning in using their product that it's your job to protect the information, not the AI's job. So for me, that is a big concern. We have privacy issues, we have privilege issues, at least in the area of law, and we have to figure out how to deal with them. Flipping that from a legal perspective, businesses have the same thing, right? With proprietary information, you don't simply want that out for general consumption. So one of the things I suspect we'll see, we're already seeing, is businesses, law firms, whatever cohort you want to use there, they're going to probably have to build their own parameters around what their people can do and try to monitor things that way, at least until we develop further. But for me, thinking as a lawyer or someone who's trying to train our future lawyers, we're going to be way better than we are. You have to think about those things right away. As a lawyer, you're bound to protect those types of conflicts and privileges, and you don't want to cut a corner and have something generate something for you and input information that maybe later will come back to haunt you and be released and now out in the public, and it was privileged and should have never been released to begin with, because that's your client's privilege, not yours. So that's a pitfall that's out there for sure, and it exists, and it's real, and we'll have to figure out how to navigate.
Relatedly, I work a lot in data privacy issues. We just heard that there has been a data privacy report filed against OpenAI, of course, in Poland, which is one of obviously the EU states. So there were, I believe, 6 articles that they claimed to violate, including access to personal information and libel. Libel being the falsified information being spread about an individual who is accessing information through ChatGPT. So there's a lot of interesting issues coming up because, as we all know, ChatGPT is prone to hallucinations. That is false information that it just spits out because it can't think of anything else better to say. That's an important point. It doesn't think. So we want to believe what it's saying is human, but it's not. In any case, when you're talking about falsified information, it can have a harmful effect on humans, and it can have a harmful effect on businesses, corporations, privacy in general. So you want to make sure that any tool that you're using to access personal information is actually giving accurate personal information. One big thing about the GDPR is that it protects your personal information very generally from any use that is not required by a business. You have to be able to show a specific business purpose for accessing somebody's personal data. And I don't think that GPT can do that. So we're going to have an interesting question there as far as how the GDPR is used to resolve some of these issues and what the data protection authorities are actually going to say.
And I don't want to pile on, but I'm going. Remember, I'm optimistic. This is what lawyers do. We're optimistic, but then we become the rain cloud on the parade because we have to try to address it. Layla mentioned that it doesn't think, the AI generally doesn't think the way we think of humans thinking. It also doesn't feel, and it doesn't react to emotion. And sometimes that is an ingredient of what you do as a lawyer when you're giving advice. You have to be able to understand the interpersonal dynamic. You have to know what the impact might be. You have to have common sense, and you have to think. And maybe AI has all these things, or maybe it will develop into having all of these things. But as I sit here today, I worry it doesn't. And I caution our lawyers and future lawyers to remember that their best tool is right here. Your brain actually does think the way we need it to. This is not a direct concern with the law in AI, but I have a concern about students and up and coming lawyers. I'll put my professor hat on. I worry sometimes too that we're going to be so optimistic, so quick to go down this road that we don't want to dilute future generations' ability to research properly, to do its due diligence when a result comes up and check and make sure that it's correct, to think, to critically think. So as this evolves, I hope that there will be those of us out there, and I plan to be one, will still advocate for you all that you're still the best people for those jobs, and we want to make sure you maintain the ability to think that way, to work that way, in the wood. Because God forbid we don't, and then something changes and we have a lost generation that doesn't have those skills. That wouldn't be good for the legal profession, or would it be good for lots of other professions that rely on us for our advice?
Yeah, just tangentially off that, I mean, evaluating risk is the number one thing that a lawyer does in any role, especially in in-house capacity like I do. So one of the things that has come about is the result of AI tools being used in our systems and being used for specific purposes around development, art, and all of these things, is that we are finding ourselves training our teams on risk. We're trying to show people what exactly they need to look for when they're evaluating software, when there's some middleware they want to integrate into a digital game, when there's some sort of generative narrative design they want to implement, how they assess that risk, the output, they're reviewing, see if it's actually in line with what we want to do. We're telling them to make sure that the software is actually functioning the way it wants to function in the end game whenever they're producing that. So it's a fun little exercise in teaching people about law without actually teaching them about law.
Maybe one more question from you, Maggie, and then we'll put it up to the group.
I was actually gonna say, I got a message from Barry Love.
Hello.
But she had a question for you, Professor Salerno, and I thought it was really relevant.
Okay.
To what
I'm a little nervous. Go ahead.
So her question is, how do you predict AI will impact legal education, and how can professors ensure students are learning to use AI as a tool to prepare them for their experience?
Okay, thank you for that, Eric. Another former student of mine, and I hope you're doing well. Lots of pieces to deal with in that question. How can I predict it will impact the teaching of students in the area of law? It already has.
Hold on 1 second, I just want to make sure, because there's mute my speaker, sorry. Apologies for that. Okay, sorry about that.
You need me to repeat?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so Barry, thanks. How does it impact the teaching of law? It already has. We've spent a lot of time, I can speak for our law school and myself here, but it's true of all law schools, I think. We have spent a ton of time already grappling with what do we do with this technology? What do we do with our students? Some of us have the philosophy. My class is a hands-on type experiential course where we actually do a real life problem. You buy and sell a business from start to finish, and you paper it along the way, and I'll leave it at that. But we can't ignore the fact that the AI is out there. So we spent a whole summer thinking, what do we do with our students here? Like, we want to prepare them to be lawyers. And if lawyers are going to use these tools, we can't hide from that. We have to acknowledge that. But at the same time, we want to make sure you develop the skills that young lawyers need to have: critical thinking, the ability to write, make sure your words are your own. Don't just steal somebody else's and try to take credit for it. People get in trouble for that in school and now in the courtrooms all the time. So we are also taking a sort of, it's moving at fast pace approach. And we have a policy that says, look, if you're going to write, it should be your own work. It shouldn't be something generated that you try to take credit for. And I think that's right. There are great ways to use AI, and I'm not going to pick on chat or anything else. There's lots of different modalities that you can use here. There's great ways you can use them to augment what you do. My view of this is, when you talk about legal writing, it can be an opportunity for something to raise the bar of a starting point from where students and or young attorneys can write from. It can give you a starting point to something, but you have to recognize, or I have to recognize, at least when I teach, that this may be a part of what the next generation of lawyers has to live with, has to deal with, so I can't ignore it. And I think it's my responsibility to help my students understand it and realize that when they get out and practice, this may be the type of thing that is not going to replace what they do. And I certainly hope not. I want them all to get jobs. If anybody's looking, call me. I want them to do that, But I think that if AI develops in an appropriate way, in a reasonable way, limit its risks accordingly, then it can be a tool that can be used to help make you better at what you do. And I used the example before of going over thousands and thousands of documents, just spending hours in doing that. It's not all that fun, but it's a critical task that some lawyers have to do. And if we have something that can help us do that, then maybe that's something we should be looking into. But for now, we have to acknowledge, for me, the human element is the critical element, and it should come first always. So it's going to keep changing, Barry, to answer your question. Like, my philosophy this semester will probably be slightly different next semester, because it is evolving so quickly that we really have to spend some time making sure we keep up. But I think we should prepare our students for the reality that, at least in the short term, lawyers are going to have to acknowledge that AI is out there and figure out what to do with it. And maybe more importantly, acknowledge that their potential clients are probably already using it, and they're going to be called upon to try to protect them from the inevitable mistakes that are going to come from doing it.
Well, I would love to hear if anyone else has questions. Yeah.
What I might do, just low tech, is just introduce yourself and ask your questions so they can hear, and I'll pass it back. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Seth, freshman at Case Western, and my question is for Mr. Sarah. Thank you. You mentioned how you're very optimistic about AI's work in law and how like it can help reduce the workload of reading documents and such. Do you feel that as AI progresses to like be able to understand emotions critically, like think about all aspects of the situation, would it put like law jobs at risk? What do you feel about that?
Oh, well, I got the microphone here. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Seth, thank you. The question is, do I think that AI will eventually put lawyers out of work? Can I rephrase it that way? Okay. Well, the honest answer is we never know how it's going to develop fully. But as I sit here today, I would tell you no, I don't think it's ever going to replace lawyers. I think it's going to change potentially the way lawyers work. I think it may be the type of a tool that someday we're going to have to recognize as an integral part of what we do. And as a result of that, we're going to have to be able to use it in a way that's most effective, efficient, and protective of our clients. And so if we recognize that, I can sit here and say to you with a straight face that I'm optimistic about it. I don't know if it will develop to the point where it can outthink us, outfeel us, outmaneuver us, outwrite us, and everything else. So I would say, no, I don't think we're going to reach a point where lawyers become obsolete. It probably feels that way to some right now, and I totally understand that. But ultimately, we've seen these types of things come up before, maybe albeit not in as a sophisticated and quick path. But the evolution of the internet itself changed the way we have to think about practicing law. Privacy issues became paramount. Law firms, using that as an example, back in the day, we didn't have data privacy departments, and we didn't have the playbook or the hotline to call if you have a cyber attack or a data breach, and you do now. Lawyers are inherently creative and adaptive, I think, and I think we'll be creative and adaptive when it comes to AI. We like being professional, and we are in a profession. And I think there's an element to that too, that it's going to be hard for AI to manage. So I don't think it will replace lawyers, but I do think it will impact the way lawyers ultimately practice. And what the extent of that is, I don't know, and I don't want to predict today, but I think it will be a part, and I'm hoping it will not make us obsolete.
All right. You'd think we'd have hybrid down 3 years later.
Hi, so my name is Ellis. I'm a graduate student here studying AI. You guys talked a lot about risk as a lawyer and advising with risk. And I mean, a big part of AI is quantifying risk. And so I was just wondering how you guys quantify risk in law, if you do that, and how you think AI could help quantify risk.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start, and I think it's an excellent question. First of all, thank you for asking. I think that in quantifying risk depends entirely on the situation in which you're evaluating that risk. So for my job and for my purposes, my risk might be, my risk tolerance, sorry, might be very much higher than somebody who is operating in a private firm. My job is to evaluate what we can do instead of what we can't do. So very often I'm presented with a laundry list of opportunities and like golden eggs and tickets that we want to pursue. And as a lawyer, my job is to look at those opportunities to see what exactly they are construed of. As for an example, if we have an opportunity to partner with a third party to create a video game, we have to look at all of the aspects of that third party. How long have they been in business? What's their track record? Are they successful? Have they marketed this kind of game before? Do they have expertise in this field? Those are the kind of things that I think AI could actually help a lot with, because they could have the opportunity, like using an AI tool to assist with research at that level would save us tons of time. And I think it would be a very good idea for us to start implementing something like that once it's available. It would also guide our decisions on things like, can we employ these artists for this particular use? Like, do they have a track record of leaking confidential information? Any of that information that's out there on the internet or even researchable through a legal tool, I think AI can help with. At the end of the day, though, after receiving that information, we still have to make that assessment ourselves. In-house, we have to decide, okay, is this valuable enough? Is the risk acceptable? Is it something where we're willing to work with this artist, even though we know that he spilled information before, because he does exactly the type of work we want him to do? Is it worth working with this third-party developer, even though they're brand new, because we know people who are in this company have had proven track record of doing good things before? So ultimately it is subjective, and I think there's always going to be that human element. But I think also that some of those things that I mentioned initially, those basic assessments could be automated, and I would love to see that happen. Did that help? Okay.
Hi, Bob Sapko, Case Western Reserve, LaunchNet, and Beal Center for Entrepreneurship. Like right now, a lot of medical images are going through an AI engine post a physician looking at it. And I would imagine that you would be doing a disservice to your patient because it may have missed something. Do you see in the future that a lawyer, because of errors and omissions and other things, that you could be held liable if you did not use an AI engine to double check your work, as you would also pass it maybe to another associate to say, can you take another look at this?
Thanks, Bob, for the question. It's an interesting one because normally we'll think of that the other way around, right? AI will produce something, we better double check to make sure it's right. That's the due diligence lawyers owe their clients, I think. I don't know where we're going to go with, we will do our best to produce something and then let AI check it. I stand, and again, I'll speak for myself, but we do have duties for our clients still. I stand on the proposition that I'm the one that's going to be liable for whatever's bad or wrong or correct or incorrect, whatever the case may be. And I'd like to get credit for the things I'm right about. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. There probably will come a day when that is a very realistic option. I don't think it's today, and I wouldn't do it today, but it's interesting to think about how the dynamic of the practice of law would change, because we've said multiple times, I think, between us, it is, to me, most beneficial, AI that is, as a tool that can be used to augment what you do as a lawyer, not to replace you as the lawyer. And for me today, I'm not ready to say I would let it be the last call on anything I did as a lawyer either. When it develops more, it may be that it will be the last line. And I will say this is a little bit unrelated, but we have seen some folks suggesting that even in a courtroom, it may be that we should start to think about using AI and its predictive capabilities as the true law. So in other words, if there's a dispute about something and we're not sure what something generally means, we can use the predictive capabilities of AI to think, what in each model is the most predictive meaning of the word, and we could solve disputes that way. So yes, I could see a day when that happens. For me personally, it makes me a little bit twitchy. I'm uncomfortable with that. But again, you know, lawyers tend to have this instinct of, I want to do it myself to be sure that it's right. And as I said, we're going to adapt, and AI is going to continue to unfold right in front of us at light speed. That may be a cultural type of shift in the profession of law that we're going to have to think about someday as to what's the last line. I will say that when it comes to malpractice and liability, until you can hold something else accountable, I'm going to be the last
Yeah,
line.
well, I would think a lawyer would be the last line, but before that, if you didn't put it through that filter,
right.
like you would put through a spell check, right?
Right.
So this is like a hell of a spell check that would basically check for a lot
Yes.
of other
Okay.
things.
Agree. I don't know if that was picked up in the microphone. What Bob said was putting it through something AI based, and then the lawyer has the last look along the way. Yeah, absolutely realistic to think that could happen. That probably does happen right now in some level anyways. We still need to clear hurdles about confidentiality and bias in documents and what information is drawn from, of course, but it is evolving. And so I say again, I'm optimistic that there will come a point, and if in fact that does happen, that may increase the efficiencies of what lawyers can do, right? We can get through things a little bit more quickly. We could charge our clients a little bit less. The businesses can do more things, or those who don't have access can get access to things. So it's not, in my opinion, and I don't know what the latest surveys will tell you statistically, that's not what's happening. And a lot of law firms are very cautious about doing that. But I think everyone would be, most everyone would admit that you can be cautiously optimistic that we'll get to the point where it's a piece of what we do. And some will tell you it absolutely should be, some will tell you it absolutely should not be. And I think the truth is going to settle in the middle at some point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Michael Sala, tech advisor with Jumpstart Toledo. So my question is, during COVID, there was a lot of unregulated algorithms and AI for a lot of devices and technology that came up through startups. My question is, this event's called AI and law, but what about law and AI? So down the road, what do you think about more so of like regulated algorithms, and how does that look in the future? That kind of thing. So thanks.
Okay, Michael, thank you. I don't know if anybody picked up on this. One of the things that I'm struggling with as I give answers is trying to keep the right perspective or the right framing. There is law and the AI, there's AI in the law. And that question is something that I struggle with. I won't speak for Layla, she'll speak for herself in a second, I'm sure. We have to have some parameters, in my opinion, around what we can do with AI in the law. It's imperative for lawyers to know what they can do with it before they do anything with it. I think we will get, just as AI is going to evolve exponentially, the parameters placed around it or the boundaries in which it can be used in a way that we're all comfortable with will also evolve. I mentioned back in the days of the internet evolution, data privacy sectors started to evolve. I think we're going to see some of the same things. We're going to start to see AI departments emerge in law firms, and their jobs are going to be to consult based upon, here's what we think you need to do from a compliance perspective, or here's the risks you have to worry about from a personal information perspective. It's not developed right now. And that's one of the fears. It's one of the trepidation for lawyers. We like to know the rules we're playing by so we can follow them. It's going to develop. I think lawyers will have to develop them to a certain extent, or at least have input in it. And it is moving that direction. Probably this is not a place where it's moving quickly, but it will need to, for me, again, I'll speak only for myself now. For me to be comfortable saying we can rely on this in a way that really is a game changer in terms of what the life of a lawyer would look like, we need legal development. We need some rules. We need some guidance. We need some precedent from courts if that's where it's going to come from. Layla mentioned the copyright decision. That's useful. We can take that and advise a client what to do with it. But to develop parameters and things like that, I actually think that's an area where you're going to have to get some input from lawyers somewhere.
I will concur, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I feel customary.
Hold on, let me get you on camera. Gotta get my steps in.
Yes.
Hey, Matt, I do know that there are several states that are trying to pass bills currently to actually regulate the AI. So I think probably a source will be state legislatures. None of those have passed yet, by the way.
Or did you wanna? Yeah, sure, go for it.
Are you guys done on that point or?
Sure,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Introduce yourself too, please, thanks.
my name's Thatcher. I'm in the engineering department here at Case Western. I'm a freshman. And my question was specifically towards law in the development of AI. So what are your guys' thoughts on regulating how companies or firms are developing their AI, almost like we oversee prescription drug firms and through that process?
Thanks.
Well, thank you for the question, and it's actually a really good segue from the last question, because that's precisely the direction we're going with the last. So at this point, I mean, it feels very much like AI is the Wild West, and as Joe Custer pointed out, there are several states trying to pass regulations around use of AI and development of AI. Some of the big points that have been addressed in those attempted pieces of regulation are, for example, maintaining clean data sets and checking to make sure that your algorithm is predicting accurately, that sort of thing. So I think that that is the road we're headed down. I don't think we're there. And I think that part of the reason we're not there is because we as a profession are unfortunately not that tech savvy. There's a few of us who are. But the majority of lawyers who are practicing are, this is all new to them. This is something that's a brand new space. Same for a lot of state legislators. They just don't know a lot about technology. We saw that with Section 230. We see this with internet regulations generally. We see this with any sort of censorship information on the internet. Like, people just don't really understand how the technology works. So nobody in law, I'm going to say that, like, blanket, nobody is an AI engineer, to my knowledge, in law, period. But there are enough people who are trying to learn about it that the regulations are going to come, but they're going to come very slowly. This is a fun space to play in, actually, because the more we get to learn about how AI functions, the better we are able to advise not only legislation, but our companies, our internal policies, our clients generally. So I think it's a really important thing for lawyers, like not just practicing lawyers, but budding lawyers like yourself, to become familiar with, just to get comfortable with what is involved in AI. What are the different types of AI? Right now we're focusing on generative AI, but there are so many versions of AI that affect any sort of work we're doing. For example, I mean, in my company, we're video games and we're board games. And a lot of the games that we deal with data privacy issues, but they also deal with machine learning at many levels. They deal with generative AI to an extent, obviously, to the point where we're talking about narrative design or we're talking about artwork. But AI touches us in so many ways. So in order to learn more about what we have to regulate, we have to learn about the technology. Yes.
Great. I have time for one more question. Great.
My name is Avi Gupta. I'm a first year in the Weatherhead School. I'm studying economics. And so my question is for either of you. I myself have built an AI algorithm that used machine learning to classify skin ulcers. And one of the problems that I ran into is that there was often a lot of laws that were hiding images that I could use for my own AI, such as HIPAA and other legal protections for patients. As AI goes on, do you think you would support making it easier for AI developers to get access to this info to help build AI that could help millions of people, or do you support keeping those protections in place?
Yeah. Okay. I love that question, first of all, because I'm an internet nerd and I'm open source and I love everything. So I love access to information. And at the same time, I understand the need to protect that information. So it's an open question as to how far we should go allowing access to information like that for training data, especially. I know there's a lot of contention out there about what source material things like OpenAI used to train ChatGPT. Some of it, was just random weird stuff from Reddit. So of course it's spitting out random weird stuff from Reddit. So for things that you're doing for medical, especially, I could see use cases in which, yes, we should make access better for you, because to predict ulcers, that's an amazing thing to do. However, we'd still need to be behind some sort of firewall, some sort of guideline for you. So maybe a system emerges in which you just authenticate into whatever that system is, indicating that you are working on developing a tool in the medical space, and suddenly you have access to all of the images that you would need. But I don't know how to do that. Frankly, I could see us working towards that. And I think it's a good goal to have. There's so many potential uses of AI, especially when you're doing something in the medical profession, that are potentially hugely beneficial. However, people's personal data is people's personal data. So we would have to find ways to, classify that data appropriately, to remove any personal information that you didn't need from that data, and to make it only limitedly available for that specific purpose. So that's something I think the world should work on.
And I'll just sprinkle my 2 cents into this, and then I guess we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
That is a difficult question for me, and it's part of what we struggle with. And I started early in this presentation saying we have sort of these two opposite ends of the spectrum that we're dealing with. All this great potential use versus how do we protect X, Y, or Z? And we don't know the answers to those questions completely. And we thought we're predicting maybe the truth will land us in the middle of that somewhere. So the lawyer in me says, I am 100% on board with using as much information as possible to be helpful. I think that's great. But what good lawyers do is recognize both sides of that, whether they agree with it or not. And the other side of that is somebody has a right to have their information protected as well. And so should we simply waive that right now because AI is advancing? I don't have an answer to that question. I just know that as a lawyer, you'd have to tackle both sides of that. And we have to find the landing place, because I think these are the exact questions that give us optimism as to the development of AI and what law can or cannot do with it. Yet at the same time, we have the nagging risk, or the nagging need to protect, that lawyers are trained to do for their clients. So depending on which side of that question I landed on, I might answer you differently as a lawyer, but that is the reality of the world that we live in when we practice law, and we need to think through both sides of it. I don't have a prediction nor a good answer for you, but I thought if I had expressed that point of view, you'll see why sometimes it's an uncomfortable topic for lawyers to have to deal with, because at some point we just don't know, and we don't like not knowing ever. We just don't.
Well, very good. Good way to end. Matt and Layla, thank you so much for joining for our first in-person event of the year. And Maggie, awesome job moderating. For students that are coming and joining us for the first time, we always do look for student moderators. So let us know if you want to moderate. Also, our LaunchNet team, I heard a few folks sprinkling with ideas for businesses. We do have funding available, grant funding available for students, and pitch competitions and all sorts of good things. Our next event, I believe, is next Friday. Alex Moen, who is our National Geographic head of their Explorer series, is going to join via Zoom, but we'll be gathering here in person. And then check our website and campus groups. We've got a number of events on campus, particularly for our Innovation Week, that are coming up, including a speaker who's works for Google Cloud, somebody talking about venture capital, an alum that used to work at Experian on data science. So we've got a whole bunch of good programs, and love to see you all here. So thanks everybody for joining again. Thank you again, Matt and Layla, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.